Today is Tuesday, April 27th, and we are going to study the Parsha because it's a daily thing that we do in a powerful way. Hence the name, Daily Power Parsha. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Typically, when I share my screen with you, it doesn't always go to the right screen.
It is my son bar mitzvah parasha.
Oh,
Emor.
this one, Emor?
Yeah. So he's
Look at
going to
you.
read this Shabbat. Actually, I talked to Rabbi Schusterman.
Oh my gosh, is he gonna join us?
Yes, he's going to read Maftir.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Is he gonna do Haftorah also, or just the Maftir?
Just Maftir.
Okay.
Maybe
All right.
maybe Fifalia also.
Okay. All right. That's great. This is exciting. All right. I'm all stoked for this week. We got a lot of powerful stuff, things happening. All right. I'm going to share my screen with you all, or a y'all, depending on your preference. And do you guys see Jewish Summer Cinema or something else?
No, we see the parasha of the week.
Okay. You know, that's so weird because I shared that screen, but a different screen pops up by me. One day I'll figure this out, or maybe I won't. It's one of the mysteries. Okay. We are in middle of the second reading. We're going to start with chapter 22 of Leviticus. If I can find it. Okay. Leviticus chapter 21 certainly was an interesting one. Certainly gave us a lot of food for thought and things to look up, which I may or may not have done. I don't have an update, by the way, of the things that we spoke about yesterday. But we have a new section to study today, so let's jump in. Leviticus chapter 22, it's on the screen. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, by the way, this phrase is the most often repeated verse in the entire Torah. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, Vayidabra Hashem al Moshe lemar, that you will find more than any other verse in Torah. Here we go. Speak to Aaron and to his sons, the priests, that they shall separate themselves from the holy sacrifices of the children of Israel, which they sanctify to me, so as not to desecrate my holy name. I am the Lord. Okay, let's toggle Rashi and let's check it out. Basically, what this seems to imply, as Rashi says, is thus, here the meaning is, we're in the middle of Rashi, I just highlighted it, that when the Kohanim are in a state of uncleanness, in other words, ritual impurity, spiritual impurity, they shall separate themselves from the holy things. So that's one explanation. In other words, again, it's about noting your state of ritual purity or impurity. If you're pure, you can serve. If you're not pure, do not serve in the temple at that time. Okay, one second. Let's continue the next Rashi, which they sanctify to me. This comes to include offerings that the Kohanim themselves, the priests themselves, sanctify to the holy temple, offerings from which Kohanim in a state of uncleanness shall also separate themselves. Okay, basically, just to cut out some of the brackets over there, what it means is when the Kohen brings an offering, whether it's someone else's offering or their own offering, it must be done in a state of cleanliness, as we've discussed. Let's continue. Say to them, say to the priests, hey Matt, welcome. Good to see you in the great outdoors. All right, verse 3, Leviticus chapter 22. Say to them, throughout your generations, any man upon any of your offspring who, while his defilement is still upon him, comes near to the holy sacrifices that the children of Israel consecrate to the Lord, that soul shall be cut off from before me. Again, if you're a Kohen, man oh man Shevitz, you got a lot of things to watch out for. If you are a Kohen and you are in the temple times and you are in a state of ritual impurity, which is defilement, right? That's ritual impurity, coming in contact with a dead body, whatever it is. You cannot come near the holy sacrifices. And if you do, that soul shall be cut off from before me. That's a spiritual punishment, the idea of kind of a spiritual disconnection. By the way, in case you're wondering, there's always a way to do tshuva. There's always a way to come back, even from the state of kares, the state of being cut off, still Tanya, the Rabbi clarifies that even then there's always a way to come back, but it means that it's a pretty severe thing. So if you're a priest, don't get near the sacrifices while in a state of defilement. Let's continue. Any man whatsoever among Aaron's offspring, the Kohanim, the priests, if he has tzarat, which we discussed last week, or has had a discharge, which we also discussed last week, he shall not eat of the holy sacrifices until he cleanses himself. Because as we said, tzarat renders, that's the spiritual leprosy type thing. So that renders a person not only banished from the camp, but in a state of ritual impurity. Or if someone has a discharge from the body, again, a man, etc., it's a source of impurity until there's a process of purification. Until that's done, he is in a state of impurity. And thus, he is not allowed to eat of the holy sacrifices until the cleansing process has been completed. And one who touches anyone who has become unclean, this is now secondhand, right? By contact with a dead person, or a man from whom semen issued, or a man who touches any creeping creature through which he becomes unclean, or a person through whom he becomes unclean, whatever his uncleanness. It's a long 2 sentences there. It's like 2 verses almost of a sentence. So in that case, so it wasn't you who became unclean, but you touched someone else who had become in a ritual state of impurity. The person who touches it shall remain unclean until evening, and he shall not eat from the holy things. The priest should not eat from the holy sacrifices unless he has immersed his flesh in water, i.e. gone to the mikvah. So this tells us that even if it's not firsthand contracting the impurity, but even secondhand, like I know a guy who became impure, and then we high-five, boom, you got to go to mikvah. Are you with me on this? Yeah? It was a big deal. It was a big deal back in the day, right? Impurity. Today, it's also a big deal, but we don't have a temple, so it's not, the implications just aren't there today as it was in ancient times. Let's continue. When the sun sets, he becomes clean, and afterwards he may eat of the holy things, for it is his food because he's a Kohen, and Kohanim don't have day jobs. So how do they eat? They eat from the offerings. So goes to mikvah, waits until nightfall, goes to mikvah, and then he is clean, or pure, not physically clean, ritually clean. All right, let's continue. He shall not eat a carcass or anything that was torn, as we said last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, thereby becoming unclean through it. I am the Lord. Again, someone who eats an animal that wasn't shechted properly, even private food issue, etc., it renders one impure, and thus that would be a problem for the Kohen. And it says, I am the Lord. In other words, be careful with this stuff. The priests, shall keep my charge and not bear a sin by eating it while unclean, and thereby die through it, since they will have desecrated it. In other words, that's kind of like an allusion to the fact that if they do, it may not end well. I am the Lord who sanctified them. Now, it's not up to the physical courts, to the human courts, to appropriate a punishment. It's not like, well, if a Kohen is impure and then goes to the temple and eats of the offerings, he gets hauled in before the rabbinical court or the Sanhedrin, the high court, the Jewish court, and has to face the music. No, it's a spiritual consequence. But God is saying, Hashem is saying, you're playing with fire. Don't mess. Don't do it. All right, let's continue. Let's talk about a new thing. Verse 10. I mean, not new, but related, but a little bit of a different topic. Not about ritual purity or impurity, something else. No non-Kohen may eat holy things. Holy things is referring to the meat of the offerings. So if you're not a Kohen, you cannot eat from the holy offerings. Important. If you brought an offering called a shlamim, a peace offering, you were allowed to eat some of the offering because that's literally part of how that offering works. We're talking here not about the shlamim, about the the sacrifices that only a Kohen is allowed to eat. A non-Kohen is not allowed to eat from those offerings, including a Kohen's resident and his hireling. Hireling? It's a hireling. I don't know what a hireling is. May not eat holy things. Someone who works in the Kohen's house. The Kohen brings home a little brisket from the temple. Yeah, it's sitting in the fridge. You're poking around the kitchen. You're working for the Kohen. You're there all day, and the Kohen's like, "Yeah, take whatever you want from the fridge." You grab some OJ. Yeah, it's almost the end. I'm just walking you through a scenario, right? You grab a bottle of OJ, crack it open. It's already open. Yeah, take a swig. It's like, what would work well with OJ? Probably not, but just work with me here. I see some meat in the fridge. Let's go for that. Boom, it's a problem. Number one, there are no fridges. This is 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 3,300 years ago. Number two, it's holy meat, Batman, and thus it is not for the non-Kohen, only for the Kohen. Even if you're working in the household of the Kohen, but you're not a Kohen, and you eat from the Kohen's pantry, so to speak, you're not allowed to eat of the sacrificial meat. Does that make sense? Yes? Ish? Okay. Good. And if a Kohen acquires a person, an acquisition through his money, this refers to a servant, and cue the caveat, not like slavery of old, etc., but this is a different form. But nonetheless, the person is still working for them in a serious way. That person, he may eat of it because he's so part of the family. So the other verse 10, was talking about somebody who's just working in the household, not as permanent. I mean, this is also not permanent, but nonetheless, someone who's more of an indentured servant, so to speak, is allowed to eat from the sacrifices. They become mishpacha, they become part of the family. And those born in his house, in other words, if that indentured servant has a child, they also may eat of his food, the priestly food. Oh, now take a look at what happens with the Kohen's daughter. Oh, obviously, it goes without saying, we didn't say this yet, but it goes without saying that the Kohen's family, wife and children, are allowed to eat of the sacrificial meat. But what if his daughter, if a Kohen's daughter is married to a non-Kohen? Okay, you with me in the scenario? You have Beryl Kohen, right? A nice Kohen, nice young man Kohen, right? He has a family, he has a wife and a daughter. So family, he has the food from the temple, brings it home, they eat it, everything is fine. She gets a little bit older, marries, what was the name that I gave? I forgot the name already. I think Beryl Cohen, maybe. Marries now Shmerel Greenstein. Cheryl Greenblatt. Done. Shmerel. Let's try this again. The daughter marries Shmerel Greenblatt. Now, Shmerel is a great guy. He's not a Kohen. So now the daughter of a Kohen is marrying a non-Kohen. So what's her status? Can she eat from the sacrificial meat? The Torah says, nope. She may no longer eat of the separated holy things. Why? Because it's not like she's no longer the daughter of a Kohen, but she now has her own family. She now has her own husband who is required by Jewish law to take care of his wife. And so she wants to, her husband is required to give her food and clothing and shelter and be, take care of her as a husband should take care of a wife. And so she is no longer under her father's household, no longer, we might say this in tax purposes, no longer a dependent on her father. And thus, if she's no longer a dependent of a Kohen, she's no longer allowed to eat from the sacrificial meat. However, but if the Kohen's daughter becomes widowed or divorced, and she has no offspring, so let's say she got married to a non-Kohen, but then the husband passes away, or they get divorced, and there's no kids, she may return to her father's household as in her youth and eat of her father's food. All right, so that's a way in which she can once again resume eating that food. But the Torah reiterates, no non-Kohen may eat of it. In other words, let's say she has a kid or she had a kid with her husband who's not a Kohen. So that child goes after the father's status. It's a patriarchal tribal system for status, for tribal status. So again, the daughter of a Kohen marries a non-Kohen. They have a child, let's say a boy. This boy is not a Kohen. Even though the mother is a Kohen, the father was not a Kohen, kid is not a Kohen. The kid is never allowed to eat from the sacrificial food, even though his grandfather's a Kohen. By the way, my grandfather is a Kohen, right? My grandfather, many of you have met, is a Kohen. My mother is the daughter of a Kohen. I am not a Kohen. So no sacrificial meat for me based on Torah law. Let's continue. And if a man unintentionally eats what's holy, whoops, I had no idea that was sacrificial meat. I thought it was from EB. I had no idea, right? So he shall, what should he do? So what do you do in this case? He shall add a fifth of it to it and give the Kohen the holy thing. So you got to basically pay it back to the Kohen, so to speak, but adding a fifth to the value. And they shall not desecrate the holy things of the children of Israel, those that they have set aside for the Lord. Let's see what that's referring to according to Rashi. Give me a moment. Uno momento, por favor. Second. Yeah. The Kohanim should not desecrate the holy things by allowing non-Kohanim to eat of them. So don't be given the non-Kohanim of the priestly food. Thereby, in other words, if one would do that, then thereby bring upon themselves to bear iniquity and guilt when they eat their holy things. For I am the Lord who sanctifies them. I am sanctifying them, and I'm saying that the priests are holy, the sacrificial food is holy, let the holy eat the holy, and the regular Jews, the 90%, 95% of Jews, or whatever it is, are not allowed to eat that meat, myself included, because we are not Kohanim. All right. By the way, in case you're feeling like, why do Kohanim have all the fun? Yeah? You ever get that sense of like, the priests get all the fun? Remember, they were not allowed to have a side gig, side job. They were dependent on the people. They didn't even have cities of their own. They were allocated certain cities. They weren't allowed to, be involved in commerce. It was a difficult life. I say difficult. It was an austere life. I think that's the right word. Austere? Austere? Does that work? Austerity? It was an austere life, a life of a minimalistic life of service of God and of the people in the temple. And so the one thing they get is the sacrificial, is the sacrifice, the sacrificial meat of some of the offerings. That's meant for them. It's not meant for anyone else. I think that's what the Torah is pointing out. All right, let's jump now back into our text, because as you may have realized, we just finished up yesterday's reading, and we're now up to today's reading number 3. Here we go. Leviticus chapter 22, verse number 17, and we are ready to roll. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his sons. Again, all of these commandments are to the priests. And to all the children of Israel. So this is priestly related, but everyone should know about this, and say to them, any man whatsoever from the house of Israel or from the strangers, means converts, or proselytes among Israel, who offers up his sacrifice for any of their vows or for any of their donations that they may offer up to the Lord as a burnt offering. So again, anyone who wishes to bring a burnt offering, remember, burnt offering is when a person wants to give a gift to God just because, not a birthday, not an anniversary, not a holiday, a just because gift, burnt offering, to be favorable for you, right? They're giving it to God, for God, and to, and for their own favor, so to speak, because, you give something to God. So it reflects well upon you. So if that's the case, then what type of animal should it be? It shall be an unblemished male from cattle, from sheep, or from goats. The key here is not the other part, male, cattle, sheep, goats. The key is unblemished, right? Whatever animal you're bringing, it needs to be an unblemished, healthy animal. Let's continue verse 20. Any animal that has a blemish, you shall not offer up, for it will not be favorable for you. In other words, you want to give God a gift just because? Make sure it's an unblemished animal. Don't bring God the just because gift of the animal that anyway was not working out for you. Right? You have a farm, you have a field, you have lots of animals, and there's an animal that anyway is not really pulling its own weight, so to speak. So you're like, what are we going to do with this guy? All right, let's give him to the temple as an offering, as a gift. That doesn't work. Don't give a blemished animal to the temple, to God. It's not a good look. It's not a good offering. And by the way, I will tell you a story about this momentarily, a very important, critical story in Jewish history that relates to this topic. And if a man offers up a peace offering to the Lord for declaring a vow or as a donation from cattle from the flock to be accepted. So again, not the burnt offering, but a peace offering. A peace offering is one in which the owner also eats some of the meat and the kohen, and some goes onto the altar. So a peace offering, again, it shall be unblemished. That's the key idea here. No blemish is on the animal. It shall not have any defect in it. And what constitutes a defect? Known in Hebrew as a mum, like M-U-M. That would be mum. How do you go mum? Mum. All right, whatever. I'll let you spell it as you wish. Any animal that has blindness or a broken bone or a split eyelid or lip, or one that has warts or dry lesions or weeping sores. If an animal has any of these blemishes, so to speak, you shall not offer up any of these to the Lord, nor shall you place any of these as a fire offering upon the altar to the Lord. So don't bring it as a peace offering. Don't bring it as a fire offering. No gift to God from these blemished animals. As for an ox or sheep that has mismatching limbs or uncloven hooves, so this is an animal that's not perfectly unblemished in certain ways, you may make it into a donation, but as a vow, it will not be accepted. Now let's see verse 23. Let's get some insight from Rashi as to what this is saying. So first of all, what's the issue? Mismatching limbs. That means that one limb is bigger than its normal counterpart, as Rashi explains. Uncloven hooves. The hooves are uncloven, resembling those of a horse or donkey. In other words, it's a kosher animal, but its hooves are somehow not cloven. So you may make it into a donation. What does that mean? Rashi says it may be sold, and its money can be donated to the maintenance of the temple. So again, if you have an animal that has certain blemishes, you can sell the animal, cash out $500 and give the money to the temple to go toward the maintenance fund or whatever it is. You can give a monetary donation to the temple that came from a blemished animal. That's not a problem. But you cannot give it as a vow for the altar. It will not be accepted. In other words, as an actual animal offering, that ain't going to work. So to offer the animal on the altar, no. To sell it and to sell it and to give the money, you can. Does that make sense? Cash is king. Cash always works. Okay. Next. Any animal whose testicles were squashed, crushed, pulled out, or severed, you shall not offer up to the Lord, and in your land you shall not do it. There's two issues. Number one, it's not an animal that's ready for it to be brought as it's not an animal that is viable to be brought as a sacrifice. Number one. Number two, you shall not even do it. That means is you should not, as Rashi says, do this, you shall not do this thing to castrate any livestock or wild animal, even of an unclean, i.e. non-kosher species. That's why a verse says here in your land to include any species found in your land. And it's also applying both in the land of Israel and outside the land of Israel. This would be an eternal statute that is binding today as well. Not to castrate an animal, whether kosher or not kosher, for whatever reason in Israel, outside of Israel. Now I know that oftentimes animals are, I remember The Price is Right. Remember Bob Barker, the old host of The Price is Right? He always used to end the show, right? Have your pets spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody. That's how he ended his show every single morning. In Torah, that could be a problem. In Jewish law, that could be a problem because there is a prohibition against harming the reproductive organs of an animal intentionally. There is an issue with that. There's an issue that's binding not only on kosher animals, not only animals being brought for a sacrifice in the ancient temple, but any animal in any land would be problematic. The idea is that it is, I don't know if the idea is cruelty or pain or suffering or just, I don't know. I'm not sure the rationale, but it says that it's not, it should not be done. Yeah, that's this verse 24 right here, right? It should not be offered up to the Lord, and in your land, you shall not do it. Your land does not only mean Israel, it means any animals in your land, wherever you are, you shall not do it. Do these practices of, again, harming an animal's reproductive abilities. Now, the question is, well, what about animal population control? How do you stop animals from, too many animals, dogs, cats, whatever? And otherwise, I don't have an answer to that. It's not my expertise by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just telling you what Torah says. It could be problematic to intentionally take efforts to take away this aspect of an animal. Okay, make sense? Okay, verse 25. And from the hand of a Gentile, you shall not offer up as food for your God any of these blemished animals. So someone who's not Jewish is allowed to bring an offering in the temple. Absolutely, is allowed to donate an offering in the Jewish temple, but not from the blemished animals. Like a Jew is not allowed to, the Gentile is also not allowed to. It's across the board. For their injury is upon them. In other words, an animal that's blemished is injured. Injury is upon them, and there's a defect on them, on these animals. Thus, they will not be accepted for you. So they're not worthy of an offering. Now I'm going to tell you this story. This is a story that you probably heard me tell before, but nonetheless, it's a classic Jewish story brought down in the Talmud. The Talmud says that at the times of the Second Temple era, this was shortly before the temple was destroyed, as we'll see soon, there was a man who had a party, and he had a friend whose name was, his name was Kamcha. I think Kamcha. And he had an enemy whose name was Bar Kamcha. And he invited his friend Kamcha to the party, but not his enemy Bar Kamcha. Well, his assistant or the post office mixed it up and sent the invitation to his enemy Bar Kamcha. So Bar Kamcha shows up at the party, and the host says, "What are you doing here?" And Bar Kamcha says, "You invited me." And he says, "No, I didn't. I would never invite you. You are my enemy." And Bar Kamcha says, "You want to take this outside?" No, he doesn't say that. He says, "All right, well, I guess I got the invitation by accident, but I'd love to stay." "I don't want you to stay. Get out. Please let me stay. Don't embarrass me by kicking me out." He says, "No, I'm going to kick you out." He says, I'll pay for my meal. No, I'll pay for half the meal. No, I'll pay for the whole party. No, you must leave. And he schleps him out. Bar Kamcha got so upset that and no one did a thing. No one stopped it from happening. I guess the host was, had money, and maybe no one wanted to, ruffle any feathers and, get the wealthy fellow, angry at them. So no one said anything. But meanwhile, this guy was very upset. So he went to Rome, or the Roman governor of Judea. I'm not sure which one he went to, Maybe he went straight to headquarters in Rome itself. And because then Israel was under Roman rule on some level. Like the temple was still around and there was still a protocol, a Jewish leadership, but it was also ultimately under Roman control as well. So he went to Rome or to whichever official he went to, and he said, essentially, I want to let you know I'm a Jew, and I'll tell you what the shmooze is, what the talk is. The Jews are planning to try to push you guys out altogether. They're trying to rebel against all Roman tentacles or any Roman grip of the land of Israel. That's the plan. And the Roman, either the general, either the governor or the emperor, whoever he went to, said, I don't believe you. I'm pretty sure things are cool with the Jews. He said, no, and I'll prove it to you. Send an offering to the temple, and you'll see they won't accept it because they're not. It's probably the emperor. They're not. They've turned against you, O emperor. And so he said, fine, I'm going to send an offering. Let's do this test. He sent an animal. And again, the temple is allowed to accept an animal offering from anyone who wants to give an offering. But what this guy Bar Kamcha did on the way is he made a little bit of a nick, a little bit of a blemish in the animal. Some say he nicked the eye or one of the blemishes that we just read in the Torah that defines a defect or a blemish in the animal that would preclude the animal from being brought as an offering. So he does this to the animal, and the Talmud says specifically he did some sort of blemish to the animal that in our law we consider it to be a blemish, but in Roman law they would consider that to be a perfectly fine animal. So the Roman officials that were also watching, because it wasn't just this Jew, it was also Roman officers that were accompanying this offering, the animal looked fine to them. The Jews, though, when they came to the temple, looked at the animal and said, we can't offer it. And they all stormed out. And the Bar Kamcha said, you see, they didn't accept it because it's coming from Rome, because it's coming from the emperor. And that's all the emperor needed to hear. And that started the crush of Rome down on the Jewish people. Basically, that started the process that escalated tensions and started the process that would ultimately culminate in the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 69 of the Common Era. So what's the point? The point is, the Torah tells us that certain animals can and certain animals cannot be brought as an offering. And in those days, they didn't even make an exception when it was very scary to do so. In other words, they didn't make an exception. Huh?
This is a real historical.
It's brought in the Talmud. Yeah, it's the origin story of the destruction of the Second Temple. Yeah. That brought Rome down. I don't know if they decided then to destroy the temple, but they certainly got, their attention was focused. Their ears were perked up.
So was there any repercussions, from God on this Jewish person?
I don't know. On the guy, on Bar Kamcha, I don't know. I don't know what happened to him, to this guy. Certainly he did something that wasn't cool, but it also wasn't cool what was done to him. I'm not justifying him, I'm just saying he felt he was wrong, so he's taken everyone down. And so it was. I don't know the timeline of how, from when that story happened to the year 69, the summer of 69, when the temple was destroyed. I'm not sure what timeline we have over there. Is it 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, 5 years? But according to the Talmud, the temple was destroyed on account of this story. In other words, ultimately, that's what led to the downfall of Judea, the temple, the exile that we've been in for the last 1900 and whatever, close to 2,000 years, all stems from the story, which I brought in previous classes to illustrate this idea that it all went downhill because we couldn't get along with each other, right? We throw a party and you can't have, you have to kick out a guy from your party. That's an indicator of just a community that is, at least, a neighborhood, if not a community, where just there's animosity and for no reason, essentially, just hatred from one to the other. And until we heal that, this is where we are. So that's what we're still working on. Okay, but back to our story. The point is that this whole halachically, this thing hinges on, right? The story hinges on the fact that at the temple, they didn't accept the emperor's offering because, like we read today, it had a blemish. And what kind of blemish? A slight blemish that in Jewish law is considered a blemish, and in Roman law they would be like that animal is perfectly fine. Don't know what you're talking about. So again, if you look at the blemishes, a split eyelid or lip, maybe it was one of those, maybe not fully split, maybe just a nick, whatever it was enough to render it not acceptable for the temple and enough to really upset the emperor. Let's continue inside verse 26. Oh, so what's the moral of the story? Let's get along with each other and not kick each other out of our parties, and then we won't have our temple destroyed. Verse 26. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when an ox or sheep or goat is born. Okay, we have a few more verses until the end. When an ox or sheep or goat is born, all animals that are kosher and that can be offered as an offering potentially, it shall remain under its mother for 7 days. And from the 8th day onwards, it shall be accepted as a sacrifice for a fire offering to the Lord, which means you cannot bring an animal under 8 days old as an offering. It's not saying you have to bring an 8-day-old animal as an offering, but that's when it becomes possible to bring that animal when it passes that 8-day threshold. Interesting. The 8th day, of course, reminds us of a bris, right? 8th day is the bris is the 8th day. And we know that it means that the child is now viable, the boy is viable, healthy, etc. You don't do it before 8 days because the child is not strong enough. Maybe it's a similar way with an animal. You wait until there's viability there. So you need to at least go through 7 days. And then from the 8th day and on, that's when it's viable for an offering. An ox or sheep, verse 28, you shall not slaughter it and its offspring in 1 day. And the same day, do not slaughter the animal and its offspring. I believe this is considered to be one of the many dozens of mitzvot that take into consideration a compassionate approach on the animal or on animals. Wow, look at this Rashi. Bombshell. This prohibition applies to the female, to the mother, namely that it's prohibited to slaughter a mother animal and its male or female offspring on the same day. The prohibition does not apply, however, to males, to the father, and it is permissible to slaughter the father animal along with its male or female offspring on the same day. Wow. According to my rudimentary reading of that Rashi, I'm just going to throw this out there. It seems to me that Rashi is saying, based on the Talmud, that the mother animal would be crushed if it saw its offspring slaughtered, or it would just be cruel if it and its offspring were slaughtered on the same day, but the dad, not so much. Okay, as a father, I'm not sure, I have to sort out my feelings about this, right? But it seems like we're more concerned about the sensitivity of the mother animal than the father animal, so as not to be slaughtered on the same day. Okay, again, it seems, maybe a little incongruous that you're talking about, compassion for an animal at the same sentence that at the same time we're talking about slaughtering the animal. And we're not saying not to, we're just saying not on the same day. Nonetheless, there is a sensitivity that this is being evoked.
Rabbi,
yes.
Is this like the story with the mother bird? Or not really?
I think it's a similar energy. That's what I'm getting from this, right? Like you don't take the baby chicks with the mother bird, the eggs. When the mother bird is there, you send the mother bird away and then you take the eggs so as not to, in the face of the mother bird, take the eggs. It seems like a similar, I would say it's a very similar energy. You don't slaughter the child, the offspring with the mother on the same day. You do it separate times, separate places, or I guess you don't need a separate time so that one is not seeing the other because of that bond, that emotional connection, or that, maternal bond there. Doesn't apply to the father, but applies to the mother. Okay, verse 20, but I would agree with that. Verse 29, and when you slaughter a thanksgiving offering to the Lord, a karban todah rabbah, a thanksgiving offering, which we said was on 4 occasions, crossing a desert, crossing the sea, recovering from illness, or getting out of jail or prison, those are reasons to bring the Thanksgiving offering. So when you do that, you shall slaughter it so that it should be acceptable for you. So what does that mean? That means as follows. You have to have, as Rashi says, it has to be done in a way that is acceptable. And what does it mean acceptable? You have to have the right intent for when you're going to eat it. It shall be eaten on that day. Do not leave it over until morning. I am the Lord, which means if you are shechting, if you're slaughtering the carbon toda, the Thanksgiving offering, and your intention is I'm going to slaughter it today, and then we'll eat it tomorrow, that invalidates the offering. That invalidates the offering because the intention was incorrect. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Every sacrifice had a different timeline. Some had to be eaten on the day that it was brought. Some you could eat it the next day, right? Either 1 day or 2 days, never 3 days. I don't believe it's ever 3 days, but it's either 1 or 2 days. So depending on the sacrifice, the Kohen had to have the intention when slaughtering it of which sacrifice this was and what the protocol is for its consumption. So if the thought was, oh, I'm going to slaughter it today, we'll eat it tomorrow by a Thanksgiving offering, that's not good, right? It shall be eaten on that day. Do not leave it over until morning. And that relates to slaughtering it in a way that is acceptable. In other words, in the slaughtering, you have to know the rule of the eating, right? Because one affects the other. You could have said, who cares what I had in mind? I slaughtered it correctly, done. Now, when I eat it, we'll figure that out later. No, you have to have the right intention. It has to be slaughtered in an acceptable way already at that moment. So we have to know the rest of the laws already when we're slaughtering it. Next, verse 31. You shall keep my commandments and perform them. I am the Lord. You shall not desecrate my holy name. I shall be sanctified amidst the children of Israel. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. This phrase, v'nikdashti, b'toch b'nei Yisrael, I shall be sanctified amidst the children of Israel. This becomes the source of the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. This could run the gamut from being a mensch, right, in a public space, when people are looking at how the Jew behaves, be a mensch, right, give a good name to the Jewish people and to God, because God kind of puts a stamp on the Jewish people, says, you're my people. So if we behave nicely, it's a good thing. If we behave not nicely, it besmirches Jews and Judaism. Like we could think of examples of high-profile Jews who did things that they shouldn't have done. And people say, a Jew, that's called a chil Hashem. It desecrates God's name. We don't want to do that. Why does it desecrate God's name? It desecrates not only the individual, it desecrates Jews because people associated with Jews, and then Judaism, which is our faith and our connection with God. So let's not go down that path. On the contrary, v'nikdashti, we're supposed to sanctify God's name. So again, it runs the gamut of being a mensch, doing the right thing, even going above and beyond doing the right thing to sanctify God's name, to even being willing to give up one's life in commitment for one's being committed to one's belief. So Kiddush Hashem would even extend in the most extreme case to someone who gave up their life as opposed to relinquishing their faith, even by pain of death. That would be the most extreme example. And of course, in I don't know, modern times, but in the last century, the example of Kiddush Hashem are the holy martyrs who perished in the Holocaust. The 6 million who perished in the Holocaust are all considered to be Kedoshim, those who sanctified God's name, those who stayed fast, anyone who died, anyone who was killed because they were Jewish, right? That automatically is considered to be, a holy, not that we look for martyrdom. It's not, we don't look for that. But if that happens, God forbid, then automatically it's a holy, they died because they were Jewish. That already is sanctifying God's name in the sense that they didn't give up, they didn't sell out, they didn't denounce. Even more recently, Daniel Pearl. Remember the story with Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal reporter. who was brutally executed over in the Middle East back in the day in, when was it, 2003, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there. Yeah, somebody look it up maybe if you have a second to look up Daniel Pearl. So, and remember his final words, I am a Jew, my father was Jewish, my mother is Jewish, right? So my mother's Jewish, my father's Jewish, whatever the exact language was, but he declared his Judaism right before they killed him. So whether that was scripted, unscripted, no one knows. No one knows, but he declared his faith. And he didn't say, I'm ready to give it up or whatever it is to save his life. At the hands of Islamic terrorists, he went and to the end, proud as a Jew. And that's Kiddush Hashem. He's a holy Jew. Anyone got the date on that? No. Let me quickly look it up.
2002.
2002. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
February.
Wow.
When was that?
2002 in Pakistan. Unbelievable. That's so long. It's almost 20 years. Crazy. All right, let's continue with the last verse. Oh, sorry. Well, let's get the momentum. That last little bit of 32. I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who took you out from the land of Egypt to be a God to you. I am the Lord. And this is a popular refrain that we have in these verses. All right. So some lessons. Number 1, let's be kind to each other. Number 2, let's offer the best to God, not the broken, secondhand, whatever. If we're giving something to God, whatever that means, let's give the best, right? Of our time, of our resources, of our energy, of our love, etc. Let's give the best. So when it comes, for example, to prayer, let's do it in the morning when we're the freshest, not at the end, middle of the day when we have just a little bit of time and energy to give to God. That's like giving a blemished offering, so to speak. I'm going a little bit like freestyling from what we learned today. So if you're giving an offering to God, make sure it's good quality stuff, the best merch, right? Best of your time, the best of your energy, best of your resources. Give the best to God. Let's be kind to each other, and let's always represent ourselves, our faith, and God in a kosher way, in a beautiful way. All right, thank you for joining me for DBP. Important announcement is that tomorrow we are on for in-person DPP. So if you wish to join, I don't know the weather.
It should be like today. Perfect.
Done. So we're done. We're good. We're outdoors. Spicy peach.
Guess
Anybody?
what? Guess what? Afterwards, you can visit me on the Beltline for my Pond City Market debut.
Oh, that's huge.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. So Donna, tell us details. You just cross over Ponce on the bridge?
Yeah,
on the Beltline?
Yeah, right behind, where we have daily Parsha when it's outdoors, that little trail, that's on the side to get to the Beltline. You just go onto that, turn left, and it's literally right there. You'll see the bicycles, and you turn in, and it's right on the Beltline. They call it the I forget what they call it, but
promenade?
No, it's the shed. They call it the shed. It's just it's a covered boardwalk.
Perfect. So it's right across from Kroger, I think, right?
Kroger,
Right
Starbucks.
across from Kroger, yes.
Starbucks, Kroger. So it's right there. It's probably like a 2-minute walk from Chabad.
Oh, it's right across from the falafel place.
Yeah. So
So
it's
on the Beltline,
2 minutes from Chabad. It's going to be gorgeous weather. What time are you there from?
So the official time of the market is 4 to 8, but I'm going to start setting up at 3.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you can hang out there. You can get some early access. Maybe you can come back.
Yeah.
But either way, tomorrow's your Beltline destination day. Yeah. So put it on the calendar and get that going. What other types of things are going to be happening there? A
farm, fresh from the farm, Georgia farm. They have produce. They have a couple of farms.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I'm
definitely going to get some food over there as well.
I'm going to send you the email. They have an email today that they say everyone that's in. So and give you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Send me the email and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
I'm in it. Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Love it.
And they have it's like kombucha, some fresh
Yeah.
types of beverages.
Yeah.
And some artisanal foods, and then they have seedlings, like if you want to plant your own, they have flowers and seedlings.
Cool.
Yeah, and then they have some stuff for the pantry, and some of it's kosher,
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll check it out. Well,
Yeah.
good. So tomorrow, DPP online, of course, always an option, but also
I
in
will be on
person.
Zoom.
Order from Spicy Peach if you want to join in person. And again, thank you all for joining. And then, of course, Donna will be there in the afternoon, right there. And
Complimentary gemstone.
awesome. Great. Super excited about that.
Yeah.
See you all.
Flyer.
Yeah.
Yes. What else did I want to say? Oh, and of course, to mention that this week, the learning tomorrow as well will be dedicated in honor of Lillian, Ray's sister. And so indeed, may our Torah study ascend above and bring lots of good blessings to Ray, to you, and the mishpacha, all the blessings that you want and need. All right. We'll see you all. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
I will do the class tonight online, and I cannot come in person first.
Okay.
Online.
Okay. Yeah. For the JLI. Okay, cool.
JLI.
All right. We'll catch you tonight then. All right. We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.